The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my guest co-host Dan Rylance. Dan is here once again because, as I'm sure by now most of you probably know, if not all of you know, that my regular co-host Tony Palmieri is seeking a seat on the Common Council and is not participating in candidate interviews this time around. We have interviewed candidates for the school board, for the Common Council, and now we're very pleased to welcome one of the two mayoral candidates, Frank Tower. And I should just say up front that because of the fact that this show, unfortunately, we got kind of messed up with the weather and the snowstorm from a couple weeks ago. So because of that, this show is unfortunately only going to air one time before the election on April 3rd. So we're going to give Frank a little extra time to tout his qualifications and so forth. So Frank served 2 terms on the Oshkosh Common Council, including a stint as deputy mayor. He's taken a year off from local politics, and why he wants to get back into this is beyond me, but he does. And so we're very pleased to welcome him here and congratulate him on his decision to run. Obviously, the mayor's position has no real power. You'd be the president of the council. Yep. Basically, you'd cut ribbons and, kiss babies and whatever else you guys do. Why at this time especially do you want to get back into this? I mean, budgets are tighter than they've ever been. Public trust in government, especially these days in the city, yes, is really at an all-time low. Why do you want to do this?
Well, actually, for those reasons that you just described, I think there is some progress that can be made. When I took a year off and I decided I wasn't going to be on council anymore, I had honestly, as I've been quoted many times, I kind of said I've put in my years, I've done my service, I've gone ahead and done that and wanted to work in the community on a volunteer basis with some not-for-profit groups and other things that interested me. And it was October, November of last year when I started really thinking about the things that we could yet accomplish, what you described, some of the trust, a lot of the communication that I think we can go ahead and improve and make better. And I said, well, doggone it, if I'm going to go ahead and want others to do it, why wouldn't I be willing to step up to the plate and champion that as well? So that's where I started thinking about, well, could I really run for mayor? Would it make sense? And would people listen to me? And could I listen to them and really make a difference in the community? And I thought, yeah, doggone it, I can. So that's why I threw my towel in the ring.
Okay. We're going to get into some of the more heavier type issues, but one thing that has changed since you've been off the council, Frank, is the budget process started earlier this year. You had a chance, I'm sure, to sit back and kind of watch that whole thing unfold. And of course, with the budget process starting earlier, the city manager had, he had done this little exercise with the departments all cutting about 3% just as an exercise, but that really got people talking because, we can't have cuts in police and fire and so on and so forth. Looking back at everything, do you think that starting the budget process early, like it was this year, was a good thing? And if you're elected, would you recommend staying with that, or would you want to go back to the old process?
Well, earlier is always better. The challenge that you run into is you don't have actual numbers to base certain things off of, so it's a little bit of a guesstimate. And then there's, of course, is there going to be a levy limit, but should the city even try to push to the levy limit? And I would suggest no. The challenge, though, is that it's fundamentally not going to matter in a couple of years because we're going to have the potential for increased labor costs, increased energy costs throughout the community, and we're not really in a place where we can increase taxes because frankly people are not able to stay in the homes they have now, and if we continue increasing taxes, that's not going to work. So there's going to be a point where those two items cross and we're going to be in a real crisis. And a lot of people will say, well, it's doom and gloom, we're going to have to start cutting core city services. We can't. So we're in a position of some potential grave danger. So what I would propose to do is some means to, we still have the budget, we have it as a base for what we're going to do, but is there a way essentially to start from scratch? Some would call it zero-based budgeting. I think that's kind of a catchy term, but really sit down and say, what does the city need to do? We have state mandates for doing certain things. I understand that. But go ahead and say, from the perspective of the taxpayer, the homeowner, the individual in the community, what does the city need to do, and can we reorganize? Because I think unless we fundamentally ask ourselves that question, how can we do government differently, better, essentially thinking from scratch, we're going to be in this constant state where it's always going to be, well, we're going to nickel and dime, can we make it this year? Are we going to not make it this year? Are we going to threaten to go ahead and cut fire and police again? And I don't think that's the place where we need to be. We need to be ahead of all of that. Now, I'm not proposing that we're going to get there in the maybe 1 or 2 years if I'm elected. It may take a little longer than that, and I think we've got some time, but I think that's the core question that needs to be asked, is how do we look at reinventing ourselves a little bit, but it's against a certain backdrop where we've got a lot of mandates and a lot of infrastructure, so it's not going to be easy.
Okay.
There is some hope in the governor's budget, although admittedly it's very early and the legislature is split, but I think he is proposing an increase in that mill levy up to 4%. There's some language in there about giving you more money for shared revenue. And we do have a Democratic representative representing the 54th Assembly who's on the same page as the governor. So I agree with you, it's going to be tough, but there is, at least in those two items, some possibility for some more revenue.
Right, and the shared revenue clearly is a good thing, but
Right.
do we want to go ahead and say, oh gee, now we can go ahead and increase our levy limits
Sure.
a little bit more, and I don't think that's the approach we want to take.
Of course not, yeah. Couple of tough questions.
Okay?
I get the sense when Bill Castle ran 2 years ago and you're running now, that there's an element in the city that really doesn't want Esslinger to be elected mayor. Because of his negativism, I think, and so the city fathers, whoever they are,
Okay.
or city mothers, whoever they are, want someone who's going to give a more positive image to the city of Oshkosh. And it was Bill Castle. Have people talked to you about that at all and encouraging you to run, that is a concern of?
Well, I think everyone who I've talked to have had concerns with what's happening in the community with regard to they want to see progress, they want to see things happen. One thing I learned very well when I was on council, it takes a lot longer to make things happen than what you want or what you even think. So that was an interesting education. But I think, yes, a lot of people are saying, while we need to recognize the past and what Oshkosh has been and where we've come from, we need to really look forward and go ahead and put a positive direction on the community, because that's truly what's going to make people rally around what Oshkosh can become, and it's also going to bring new investment into Oshkosh, whether it's jobs or it's people or whatever it is.
Sure. Are you going to be the same sort of governor? Or
Mayor. No, not governor.
The same mayor as Bill Castle, or what will you do differently if you're elected?
One of the things that I will definitely do differently that I don't think Bill completely embraced was the fact that you're the generally elected mayor for the community. And that means that people have voted for you. I think he unfortunately thought a little bit too much of it like when in previous times the mayor was appointed, essentially the council president, and then the vice president is the deputy mayor. And he had been in that role before and was familiar with that. I don't think he completely took hold of the fact that you're the generally elected mayor. People essentially said, you are the individual we want to represent us in all that can be. So from that aspect, I think that I need and will step up to the plate if elected a little bit more with regard to that. And that may mean everything from doing, as you say, the cutting the ribbons, the keys to the cities, but more tangible things where you're actually out talking to people, what are concerns in the community, so we can get that information back and make things happen.
The Rickman approach, Stu Rickman, the executive editor of the Northwestern, opined a couple months ago that the only thing wrong with the city is that Richard Wolnick is that he needs a better boss. And he goes on to say that it would be too much to ask the mayor to be the city manager's boss. And he says really the only issue that matters in this April 3rd election is the race for the governor, or race for the mayor. I'm sorry, I keep doing that.
Boy, you want to elevate him to
Yeah.
that top.
Yeah, I'm not ready for that. No, no, no.
So I'm sorry, Mayor. You know, are you going to be the city manager's boss if you're elected mayor?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But in as much as being the city manager's boss, it's working with the council to make sure they're being the city manager's boss as well. It's not a
Okay.
solo effort, it's a team effort with regard to making sure we're keeping Richard and in turn the entire city staff accountable.
Okay. So you make a promise that, you know, if you're elected,
Absolutely.
that this accountability issue that we've heard virtually with all of the candidates for common council, that you know, you're gonna
Yep.
meet often and regularly with the city manager.
Yep. And some of the things we need to do as well. Clearly, the budget is one of the larger documents that we use to go ahead and gauge the year and what the council is very involved with. But as the council is doing right now, going through the city manager's evaluation and goals, when I was on council, we tried to push more towards actual, tangible goals that can be measured. And I would hope when I'm on council, if elected mayor, working with the council, we can even have further, more tangible goals, but that are even more specific. An example is the website. We asked to have a new, improved city website, and we have that, but the failure that we had at the time of saying that is we just said, we want a new website. We didn't say what it should look like, should we involve certain elements of the community, how should we make that happen? It was left up to the city manager, and you don't want to completely micromanage, but at least you want to put some parameters within which this is what the council feels we should go ahead and do with this particular goal. So even getting more specific is what we absolutely have to do. Because if we can't measure it, how do we know if it's happened or if it's working?
Well, you know, the new website was one of Dick Wollink's goals, and I think that you were on the council when that goal was set, weren't you, or was that after you left?
No, that was,
Okay.
I was right, that was right when I was getting off council.
You know, do you think that the city manager should have more important goals than that? You know, we keep hearing about accountability, and I think that we do need greater accountability. And I think that the council does need to demand that from Mr. Wolink, and he in turn needs to demand that from his department heads. But do you think that these are kind of sort of vanilla type goals that you're giving him, and he should have a greater charge being given to him?
Well, some of the goals, I think the website, being an internet guy that really appreciates being able to get information at 2 a.m. in the morning if I need to, I think that was actually a pretty big one, because that's a fantastic means that the city can use to get information out to the community. So I consider that to be a pretty big goal there. The other one that is still on there is really taking the city hall environment and making it more customer friendly. That's everything from coming in and paying your tax bill to going ahead and dealing with the inspections department or planning, whatever it be. So some of those goals are pretty big. So I think you're absolutely right. We need to keep big ones going there, but I don't necessarily agree that what we've given them thus far is vanilla. The concern I would have is perhaps we need to give big goals, but make attainable timetables. In other words, don't propose something that's going to take 10 years and say you need to do it in 2 months. I think that's completely unreasonable.
Okay. Greater accountability. Let's stay on that for a while.
All right.
It's a major theme, Cheryl.
We're taping this on the 15th of March, 2 nights ago, at the Common Council, as you well know, and you're shaking your head, so I know you probably know the question that's coming. $2.7 million in additional TIF money was given to the Old Mercy Medical Center, and a new person coming into the picture, Community Retirement Living, better known as CRL. As it turns out, CRL had a past relationship with Ben Ganther, who currently owns that property and who has failed to meet his obligations. That information was not brought forward to the council nor to the city manager, as we're now learning, even though it was out in the public before. Nobody remembers it, and again, including the city manager. What do you think about the fact that this was not brought up at Tuesday night's council meeting, or to Dick Wolink before that, and what needs to be done about that?
Well, I was frankly floored and disappointed that it was not. And I was actually on the council in '02, as was Paul and a couple of other members of the current council, and none of us remembered either. So I think that just goes to show that when we're especially talking about large projects, we need to be very cautious with what information is presented to the council. Bring everything forward, every reasonable shred of paper, so that we can make an informed decision as a council and as a community, and it's out there in the public. Now, had that information been presented on Tuesday's meeting, would the outcome have been different from a vote? Maybe, maybe not, but at least the information would have been out in the community for people to know. So in that particular aspect, I think Jackson should have gone ahead and put that information out there. Now, it may have been just he didn't think it was necessary because it was a small aspect. Whatever the reason, the problem we run into now is we're going ahead and we're seeing it in the newspaper, and it's going to put a certain taint on things going forward, where now not only the city council, but the public is going to say, well, okay, we're doing this new development project, and maybe the greatest development project ever. Are we getting all the information? And that's the fundamental problem with what took place on Tuesday, is it was just thought, well, this isn't really all that important. Well, how do we know what is and what is not important? So that's why it's that much more important to go ahead and put everything out. So I hope what that translates back into, as I was talking to actually the Northwestern a little earlier today, is Richard going ahead and sitting down with Jackson and having a dialogue, heart-to-heart discussion, whatever you want to call it, and say, we really need to make sure that we're putting forth everything to the council and to the public so we can go ahead and let everybody know everything. That way, we can all understand what's going on, so there's an informed and reasonable decision that's made. And I think it's going to take quite a while for us, coming off of the Five Rivers thing that happened not all that long ago, and put a little bit of doubt on the Access project. I think the Access project is something very good and has a lot of promise. But again, you've got that taint going forward, and that's the last thing we need if we want to go ahead and move forward in this community.
Right. Well, do you think Jackson Kinney should be, and certainly this shouldn't be public, I don't think, because that would violate his rights as an employee, but do you think that it's a situation where, because of this, he should be formally disciplined by the city manager?
I don't necessarily think so. I'm not sure all of the specific details, but at least there needs to be a conversation had. And if nothing else, if we can get anything positive out of this, use this as a tool to work with the rest of the department heads and the rest of the staff to say, this is what can happen when we don't get all of the information out to the public, out to the council. So we need to move forward on this, not move back.
Okay, and then just one other question that I have on that, and Dan, you may have some others, but obviously Ben Ganther is still going to be involved in this project from a design and a construction standpoint, and you know, not only did he was not able to make good on his end of the deal, but he's still involved. He's got taxes that are consistently in arrears. Does that concern you at all?
Oh, absolutely.
That he's still involved in this, and what, if anything, would you recommend doing about that?
Keeping a real tight leash on the projects he's working on in the community and what he's doing in the community. And I guess I don't know for sure what Jackson will do, but I got to believe Jackson's going to have a much closer eye, as will Richard, as will the entire community, on what Ben, that is doing in the community and the projects that he's involved with.
Okay. One more question.
No, go ahead. I have one on this too, but go ahead.
Because you brought this up when we did the show with Mr. Shireman. You had also received a campaign contribution from Mr. Ganther.
Yeah, in the first two times that I ran for council.
If he comes before the council with projects, or in a situation like this where he is still somehow involved, would you recuse yourself from voting on that issue?
Well, I've not received a campaign contribution for him for the mayoral election. So in that particular case, because what I did on council was in the past, I don't feel it would be necessary to recuse myself.
Okay.
Just one more question on this. You know, we talked about you kind of want to give a little different emphasis as mayor. If you would have been mayor this morning and you would have picked up that piece, what would you have done?
I would have immediately called the city manager, Richard Wolink, and said, what happened?
Okay.
What's going on? And then perhaps is there a time for myself, yourself, Richard, and then Jackson to quick get together and find out what happened here? Because clearly this is, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, it really puts a black eye on what is potentially a great project.
Would
And
you?
then,
Go ahead.
and then from there, clearly contact the Northwestern and chat with the staff and team over there to give my opinion and impression after I met with Richard to say, here's what happened, here's what we're going to do going forward, so that at least there's some understanding by the Northwestern of, because that's obviously a large source of media and news in the community, here's what we're going to do about it.
Would you have urged the council to bring it back for reconsideration?
I think it at least needs to come back to the council to have some discussion.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
A couple of quick little questions. I think when you were on the council, you served on the committee that kind of oversaw OCAT and these operations and stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, I was on.
Yeah. I'm looking around here. Has OCAT outgrown its facilities?
I don't know where we would move OCAT to if we go ahead and need more facilities, but I think that OCAT is doing a great job. Whether it's outgrown its facilities, I'd have to chat with John a little bit more to go ahead and see.
But clearly it's a great success story.
Oh, absolutely. And not only with OCAT, but what they were able to parlay that into with the WOCT and the fact that we've got the radio broadcast as well.
It looks like it's outgrown its facilities. If you're elected mayor, the first thing you're going to do at the reorganization meeting is you're going to propose new rules for the council to operate for the next couple of years.
Yep, that's number one.
So I have a couple questions for you.
Fire away.
I know you're not supportive of citizens' comments. In fact, I think you've been on record on that before.
Actually, I've changed my mind.
Oh
so
no! Well, tell us. So you're not going to move to get rid of them.
No. Actually, a little bit at the reverse, which we can chat about it a little bit at length. But talking to people in the community and going to other communities as well, seeing how they conduct their council. Even the county board is quite a bit different. And the thought and the challenge that I saw, especially in recent times running, people in the community really get their what's happening in the city of Oshkosh on the second and fourth Tuesdays. And that's good and bad. So if there's another vehicle or another mechanism where we could get true citizen input, Brian's done a great job with his Fifth Tuesday forums. We need to continue that and look for other avenues. But people really get their impression and want to communicate with the council if they feel they're not being able to do it with staff or council members directly on those Tuesday evenings. So taking a step back and looking at that, not only do we need to keep the ability for the citizens to comment on the consent agenda items, the other items, but also provide the citizen statements. What I would like to do, though, is go ahead and maybe move them to the beginning of the meeting.
Oh, I think that's a good idea.
So,
that was my next question, seriously.
And originally they were at the end, they were moved at the beginning, and then the thought was, well, we want to conduct the business of the city first, but sometimes as a council, if you hear about things right away, then there's some time to go ahead and react or do something. So I would look to potentially put them at the beginning. The other thing I would like to do is we've got for whatever's pertinent or for the good of the city and the council member statements. I'd really like to do something different there. Take away the just general generic council member statements, and we've got the whatever else is pertinent. Find some means via which, I don't know what we call it, for the good of the city, other business, other might be a little bit too vague for our attorney general, so we need to work there.
Maybe your city attorney.
But the bottom line is go ahead and reconstruct that. I see value in having a time at the end of the council meeting to do things, as simple as we're going to be talking about budgets, or we need to schedule a workshop. Everyone flip out your calendars, what works for you. We need to do that so that not only the council members, but the public knows, oh, hey, there's going to be a workshop on such and such. So I'm looking to go ahead and make some modifications there. The other thing I'm hoping to do is after the consent agenda, right now there are the various ordinances and resolutions, and they're read, each one of them, then there's public input, and then it comes back, public input, and then once all that's done, then it comes back to the council. What I'd like to do is alter that so that we can go ahead and read whatever resolution it is, have the public comment, then immediately have it come to the council. And then the council can debate and decide and make a vote, and then we go on to each one. And my reasoning for that is at times there are things that we discuss in the actual resolutions and ordinances there that may warrant additional public input or comment. Now, I'm not advocating at least immediately we have an automatic, it was out to the public, now the council discusses it, we automatically put it to the public, now it's back to the council. That would be the complete extension of that, but more the citizens provided input, then the council has some things, and maybe someone in the back raises a hand or there's something else that comes up. It's going to be a lot easier for the council to stop right there and get some more input if necessary, and then proceed on.
I
Or
like
if
that.
there's an amendment offered.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
some of the things I'm
I have a beef on the council members' statements, and I know they're elected, and so you really can't touch them. But I used to call it, or I call it the Melanie Bleckel show, because when I first was in Oshkosh, there were 2 council meetings. There was a regular council meeting, and then when Melanie got to the council members thing, it was a whole other meeting. And there are some abuses, and my concern is that they're really discussing non-agenda items where it's not on the the list of things to do. There's no public discussion, and they take action on it. The one that comes to mind is Brian Bain's idea to have a fiscal audit or performance audit of City Hall. That whole discussion was never on the agenda. It was totally discussed at a council member's portion of the meeting. Seems to me that ought to fit back, and it ought to be. And I think Esslinger misuses, maybe in the spirit of Melanie Bleckel, to really go beyond what a council member's statement. I don't know how you control that, but I am concerned about that. Any ideas on how you can handle that?
Well, like I just described, if there's
okay.
a way we can go ahead
Yeah.
and take those, the council member statements and the whatever else is pertinent and try to fuse them into something which is more about the business that needs to be conducted because of scheduling or going ahead and saying we're going to do a workshop, whatever it may be, to get that input from the council from more a coordination standpoint.
Yeah, I like those ideas. I really do.
We'd mentioned the Attorney General just very briefly, kind of in jest earlier, but speaking of the Attorney General, you were on the council when Five Rivers, when that subject went into closed session, and Dan was one of 5 people who tried to crash that meeting.
Briefly.
I was working that night and was unable to be there, but Tony and I did file a complaint with the Attorney General's office, and the AG's office said that at least part of that meeting was
The first part,
improperly convened. I understand that you got your direction from the city attorney, and he still maintains that if he had to do it again today, he would give you guys the same direction. If you were on the council and that type of situation came up again, would your approach be the same?
No. What I would do is take that meeting and segment it. The second half, which was more a discussion that was about, with Springstead, with the city staff, to go ahead and say, is this a viable project? Is this individual something that we can proceed with, and still keep it the way it was? Because I think that was reasonable, given that we were talking about the land acquisition. But would have taken the first part of that and had it up in. The easiest probably would have been the council chambers, and go ahead and have the dialogue with the developer, the person who is the one who is essentially selling the project to the city, and what is this about? What are the things he's going to propose with it? I think that should have been done that way. So in that particular respect, I would not have done it the same if it happens again. And I think you see that happen with access, good or bad, whether you think about the project, that the individual came forward and was at the council meeting talking about it.
Yeah.
And that's a refreshing change, I think.
Yeah.
It's very nice to see. And their project seems to be more down to earth as well.
Right, it's closer to the living learning concept that the university has proposed, which I thought was fantastic.
Sure. If a situation isn't quite as clear cut as the Five Rivers meeting now is in so many people's minds, but there's questions in citizens' minds or whatever, and time is not critically of the essence. Would you at least be willing to sit back and put it on a back burner for a couple of weeks until the AG's opinion can be sought?
Yeah, and I think it can be even defined more narrow as far as a should we or shouldn't we, independent of what Warren may or may not advise us to do, and that is, are we going to be interacting directly with the council and or staff on something that's a land acquisition or the city manager, or are we going to be having some type of other input? Is it going to be a developer, whatever it may be, where that individual is coming forward? I think it's pretty straightforward that if that's going to happen, open meeting, absolutely. If not, then we perhaps have a closed meeting, but we need to get complete direction from Warren and or from, if we need to go to the AG perhaps.
Okay. You've gone on record as saying that you want to see the redevelopment downtown done faster.
I would like to see it faster. I don't think it's going to happen faster.
Well, that was going to be my question. I mean, given the constraints with resources, how would you do that, and what, in your opinion, still needs to happen down there?
Well, the big thing is Main Street. I think that's really what everyone's waiting on, the streetscaping, the going ahead and putting the potential of islands and really making it beautiful. But the state, which we clearly have to work on given the construction and what we need to do down there, has postponed that to 2011. So there's really, it's going to be beginning in 2011. So I don't think there's much we can do there, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and do the best we can with the downtown between now and then, and perhaps take some of that effort and energy and reinvest it, whatever we can do, maybe putting something together even more advanced for the South Shore redevelopment. We've got the Pioneer that clearly has stagnated. Is there any way we can reinvigorate that, re-engage the developer there? We've got the Near East neighborhood. I think we're finally really paying attention to what is kind of historical Oshkosh, which I find very exciting, and some things happening over there. And of course, we've got the west side. We've got some development that happens. Lowe's may be coming in next to some of the other development out there. So I think we can take perhaps some of that effort and say, you know what, downtown's still going to happen, but let's take that energy and make other parts of the community happen.
We're down to like 4 minutes. Got a
Oh.
quick one or something?
Yeah, future question for you. Not governor, I've promoted you twice tonight for that. But I know the Republicans really want that 54th Assembly seat back
Yeah.
in 2000. You've been identified with the Winnebago County Republicans,
Yeah.
is that fair?
Yeah, oh,
Would
absolutely.
you rule out tonight, if you win it for mayor, you will not be a candidate against Gordon Hentz in 2008?
Not for Gordon Hentz in 2008. Something would really drastically have to happen differently, and I don't know how you do it. It's a
Okay.
huge conundrum.
Okay.
Being there firsthand, seeing the dollars that were spent, how nasty the race got.
Okay.
It didn't get as nasty as the one a little bit to the north,
Okay.
but just seeing that firsthand, and I know both of the individuals that ran, and they're both reasonable, decent individuals, and just seeing essentially the process make it terrible, I don't think I could see myself going through that process. It's not what the Founding Fathers wanted in any way, shape, or form. So how we make that change, I'm not sure. But for the moment, I'm going to concentrate, if elected, on the city of Oshkosh.
Fair
Okay.
answer.
And there has been a lot of discussion, both in the city and at the council level, of a, whatever you want to call it, a productivity study, an efficiency study, an efficiency audit, what have you. But whatever you want to call it, it's going to cost about $130,000 to do. Are you in favor of something like that? Do you think it's needed?
Not at the moment. It goes back more to what I commented initially. I think we need, we can do a productivity study, but I don't know what it's going to prove or show, especially depending upon within the context it's done. Is it done by an outside party that's going to cost more? Is it internal? So there might be some question as to its legitimacy. I think we need to go further and really say, what do we want city government to do? Because we can shuffle the chairs around, but as they say, you shuffle the chairs around on the Titanic's still going to sink. So I think it's more an idea of what can we do as an overall concept with city government that's different and better. So at the moment, I would not be in favor of the productivity study unless I get some more information about it or it becomes more compelling.
And then just very briefly also, it's an enormous subject, but we've only got
We've got 30 seconds.
Yeah, we've only got a short period of time. Contract negotiations for public sector employees. We hear about, the terribly high amounts of benefits and salary that they're paid, so on and so forth. Concessions were made on both their part and the city's part this last time around. You're in favor of continuing along that
Yes,
path?
I think we need to be reasonable and respectful. We want qualified professionals working here in the city because that's what we need to provide the basic services, core services that the citizens have come to expect. But at the same time, we need to be reasonable about the increasing costs that the city incurs and to a certain extent making sure it's parallel and reasonable with what being the outside community. I realize sometimes you can't compare them apples to apples, oranges to oranges, so staff and the council need to be respective of that. But we need to be clearly thinking about what is reasonable for the city and at the same time for those that we employ.
Okay. Why don't you take about 20 seconds or so, look into camera 3, and tell folks why they should vote for you tomorrow.
That's right.
Well, I want to thank both of you for allowing me to be on the show. My name is Frank Tower, and I'm running for mayor for the city of Oshkosh to provide a reasonable, responsible, and positive vision for the future of Oshkosh. I think I have the leadership skills and the qualities to go ahead and communicate with constituents, advocate, and really make the Oshkosh community a better place to be. I always promise to listen to the needs and concerns of everyone in the community to make it a better place to live, work, and play, and I would appreciate your vote on April 3rd. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks very much.
You bet.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Jim Simmons from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, political science professor there, and we'll kind of do a recap of all the candidates. We'll be right back. Thanks very much.
Good luck to you.
We just escaped.
I escaped
I escaped.
by foot.
And ran across the border.
I couldn't practice my religion.
I was put to work in forced labor camps.
If I stay in Cambodia, I would have been dead by now.
If you think differently, then you're an enemy.
If you know how to read and write, you're dead. You speak your mind, you're dead.
The only way to express what I wanted to do was to get out.
I got to the country when I was about 14 years old.
I was 20.
I was 24.
I came here with nothing. No money, no English.
America stood for freedom, it stands for freedom, and that's what all my generation, young generation, wanted to be there.
For the first time, I felt like I have a right to be on this earth.
Here, you can do whatever you want to do.
I love my life here. I feel at home.
I'm free to do what I want.
Freedom to me means my life.
How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Thanks.
If only child abuse were this easy to recognize. If you even suspect abuse, call 1-800-4-A-CHILD. All calls are anonymous and confidential. Trust your instincts.
Poor nutrition today will increase Sarah's chances of anemia, add to her healthcare costs, sick days, even stunt her ability to learn. And the thing is, Sarah's not even born yet. Get proper nutrition before it's too late. Call or visit WIC. WIC provides nutrition information, healthcare referrals, even food. Your child has you, and you have WIC.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz and Dan Rylance, and we're now very pleased to be joined by Professor of Political Science at UW-O, Jim Simmons. He's a familiar face to regular viewers of this show, and we're very, very pleased to have you here. So thanks very much.
Pleased to be here.
We want to talk about the election, and this, of course, is going to air one day before the general election, so it'll air a couple times after that, but it's this first airing that we're most interested in, because tomorrow's the election. Let's talk about City Council first. There's 3 seats available, 6 candidates running. 2 are incumbents, Meredith Shireman, Brian Bain, and then we've got, I think, just a host of good qualified candidates in the other slots as well. So what is your take? I know you've kind of been following the interviews and the forums and such. What's your take on what's going to happen in that race?
Well, we're picking winners and losers already without discussing the quality of
Well, you can go ahead and discuss them, sure.
Well, I mean, if you were, just doing a horse race and projecting winners and losers, which I guess is what we're doing here, you'd probably say, all things being equal, the final results will probably look very much like the primary. I mean, there may be an extensive campaign, which we haven't seen yet, with candidates spending a lot of money and becoming very visible, and the local media picking up more than they have, but I haven't seen much of a campaign since the primary. I mean, of course there are yard signs up, people are going to the Rotary clubs and speaking where they can, but unless I'm missing something, and not much, I think, has happened since the primary to change the result. Perhaps the Old Mercy scandal, if that evolves, that might impact the results. But I would probably guess that, I could see Jessica King overcoming Sharman, maybe, or Tony Palmieri. But I'm guessing it'll be Bain, Sharman, and Palmieri.
You know, Shireman, 2 years ago when she ran, she was clearly the leader. And this time in the primary, she came in third. About 100 votes thereabouts behind Tony Palmieri, who's never run for city council before. You know, what do you attribute something like that to?
Well, she was the leading vote getter by a wide margin, too, and very visible in the campaign, and worked very hard. And the only person who worked harder was probably Brian Bain, who went from 6 to, moved up the ladder.
And did one of those campaigns you're suggesting hasn't happened
right.
yet.
And Sharman doesn't seem as engaged this time around. I mean, she missed one debate. She's been out of the out of town. She, her statements to the local paper and to everyone else are relatively brief. So I think of the people who finished in the top 3, she might be the most vulnerable. And Tony, although he's never run for council before, has run for other offices, and he's had his own television program and worked with you. He's probably the most well-known of everyone, including the council members. So that didn't surprise me at all. And council races are oftentimes popularity contests, all things being equal. And if you look at the literature, of course there are differences, and if you're political junkies like us, we notice those things more than we notice the similarities, but the council candidates all sound very much alike. They keep, partnerships and communication.
They have all these words.
They're all using the same buzzwords. If they were using somewhat different buzzwords, we might read more into them, but they support the council manager system. Or if we're going to strengthen the power of the mayor, then we ought to change the form, but they don't seem to be too much in favor of that. So there's not a lot to distinguish.
So this is a personality-driven election more than issues?
I think it is. And last time it was not. Last time we actually had a contest between what looked like political parties, and that's one of the reasons why Brian Bain moved up, not just because he worked very hard and is a relatively articulate candidate, but he was seen as part of the, for lack of a better word, the pro-development group. Those most supportive of the current form of government and those most satisfied with the direction the city was taking.
If Tony Palmieri is elected, and I asked he and Brian Bain both this when they were on the show, and I don't know if you saw that or not, but if he were to be elected and Bain wins re-election, that gives us 3 university employees on a 7-person council. And some of the people out in the community have expressed a little concern over that, not because they're associated with, a think tank, if you will, but because if there's an issue that comes up that involves the university, then you've got almost half of your council that has to basically recuse itself. Do you see that as a problem at all for the 2 who are running right now?
Actually, I had a conversation with our chancellor about a week ago, and he said that anything affecting the university, if we want to close a street, or we've got a project, or we're putting up a new academic building, and we've got to get a vote from the city council, we've got 3 people who can't vote right off the top, and so you almost have to have a unanimous vote by the remaining 4.
Yeah, you do.
Similarities between the 3, though, Burke Tower and Tony Palmieri, I'm not sure that on the campus they may both be professors, but one's a professor of business and other communications in the humanities division, and I think they're not all that alike. Not.
But as far as 3 university employees,
sure.
You think that could pose a problem then?
Well, remember that the university is like a city within a city. I mean, we've got 11,000 students and 1,400 employees, so it's not too unusual for that number of people to be interested. In fact, it always surprised me that there were so few people from the university that cared enough to become engaged in community affairs.
I have another hook on that. I didn't bring it up when we were interviewing Tony and Brian, but it seems to me from a community standpoint, it seems to me one of the negatives or deficiencies of the public employee is they've never done payrolls. they don't know anything about economic development. They've never had to take risks and loans and stuff. So they might approach it, you know, analytically and from theory and stuff, but they really never have had any hands-on experience with development. And when you have that many on there, although Tower is clearly in business and entrepreneurship and that sort of thing, but you know, that maybe that would be something that also would be brought up.
He not only is an entrepreneurship, but he has that business incubator organization where he, you know, teaches on, and helps people who want to create businesses do it. So, and so I doubt that criticism affects him. And Tony was the chairman of a department, and if you're talking about dealing with budgets, I mean, I've had more experience dealing with budgets than our city manager did before he took his job, because I had you know, 12 employees plus a budget much larger than he had to deal with. So I don't think that's true.
Okay. What is your take on the slate of council candidates as a whole?
I think it's, you know, for want of a better word, with a couple of exceptions, it's fairly establishmentarian group. I mean, most of the candidates are fairly satisfied with the direction the city is moving. You know, there are exceptions to that. Palmieri and Eslinger are clearly stand out in that way. And Tony was fairly strident about that in the first debate, but less so after that.
Coming second helps.
Right. Sitting on your lead, maybe.
Yeah, I think a little. You know the game.
But no, I mean, they all talk about communication, and they all say that they'd like to see the city manager play more of a leadership role, and they'd like to see whoever becomes mayor, you know, play the role of someone who, you know, is more visible and more active on behalf of the city. But I don't think many of them would change all that much, and I don't see a lot of variation in the ideas they offer. In fact, once you get back, you know, beyond the broad statements they make, you don't see much of substance. I think, you know, I think King set for herself certain goals. How do we know that she's achieved, you know, what she intended? And she lays out a number of points, but the others don't.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Paul Eslinger. Let's talk about him. Of course, he's running against Frank Tower for mayor. Paul has been pretty quiet during this campaign. He's not participated in the Oshkosh Northwestern's discussion or blog, their online political forum. He's not participated in some of the debates or forums that different organizations have held. I guess he's got some signs up now. You were mentioning to me, Dan, that he's got some signs up and so forth, and I've seen a couple in the last day or two. You know, what do you make of that?
Well, I intended to schedule a debate at the university. Actually, it was going to be tonight, and
I beat you to the punch.
and then of course, once there were these conflicts, I was going to put it off to the 28th or 29th, and now it looks like it's not going to happen. But Paul didn't seem to be very anxious to be involved in that, and he needs to be. I mean, he's got a very attractive opponent, someone who I think will be more difficult an opponent than Bill Castle was. Not very different in terms of substance than Bill Castle, but at least in terms of appearance and speaking ability, I think a stronger candidate. So I think in order to win this race, Paul has to be more active than he was last time around, and I haven't seen that.
Why do you think that is? You know, I mean, I guess look into your crystal ball here. I mean, I know you're not Paul Eslinger, and but you know, you are a political science guy.
Well,
so what do you think?
I mean, it's hard to look into Paul's head. You know, I've talked to him a number of times. He's clearly someone dissatisfied with the direction that the city is taking for a lot of good reasons. On the other hand, he might not be the right messenger. I mean, it's not so much that Paul is wrong or is off base on his criticism of the city, but he might not be the best one to carry the spear. And he has employment problems, so that probably holds him back. I mean, his ability, he doesn't, spending his own money on the campaign. And last time he was part of a team. There were a number of candidates running with him, wanting to change the city, and this time he's pretty much on his own. So that might be why he's a little bit less enthusiastic.
Is there any evolution of the position of mayor, if not in substance, in appearance, from Bill Castle, who simply said 2 years ago, I'm going to be the parliamentarian of the council, make the appointments, and that's all I'm going to do? Are Tower and Esslinger promising more, and is it within the definition of what a mayor can be?
Well, I know as president of the faculty that you can take a soapbox and do a lot more with it than the actual powers that you have in the position. And I know that having positions which are largely symbolic, some people take those positions and manage to accomplish a lot, and others did it simply as something to put on the resume, something that might promote their own business or their own careers. So I think it does matter who's mayor, even within a council manager form. I think if you change the functions and powers of the mayor within the council manager form, and there's a lot that you can do, depending upon who holds the position, it does matter. But one of the things that I've noticed with Paul, the one thing he wants is a veto. Now, what that tells me is that he feels he's always going to be on the minority on the council, and if you could catapult yourself in the position of mayor, then at least you could prevent the council from doing things that you really think.
This afternoon on League of Women Voters, he modified his veto of the mayor, and quite honestly, I did not understand it. But it's a change from what he's been before. And it's like a mayor not voting anymore, leaving a 3-3 vote, which I don't, but it was not real clear. But he's changed his...
But that's he always feels that there are probably going to be one or two dissenting, councilmen or council people, and probably no more than three, who want to slow down growth, who want to focus on basic services, whose primary concern is the middle-class homeowner or the elderly person, the person on fixed income. And since he feels that way, his view of empowering the mayor within the council manager form is having that minority vote, preventing the worst that some of the more ambitious council members, what they might do.
Okay. I didn't happen to see the form, but so you're saying that he is recommending that the mayor not vote then on the majority. Would they break a tie in the event of a 3-3?
He would break a tie.
Okay. So he would break a tie, or whoever would break a tie, and then they would have this veto power?
It was unclear how the veto thing would work if he only voted on a tie, and the moderator asked for him for further explanation. I guess my point is he's modified just the straight veto that we were talking about and has lessened it. But you'd have to, it was unclear to me. One thing, will this council be harder on the city manager than the previous council? I mean, we hear this that all the time, everyone comes here, more accountability, et cetera. Is this going to be a harder 2 years for the city manager?
Well, I think it will, just out of necessity, because the challenges for the city will grow.
Okay.
And anything more like these cases with Five Rivers and now the hospital, and the feeling that there's a lot of insider snake oil salesmen coming before the council, and at the last minute council voting on things that they're not completely aware of, and they don't know what the ultimate liability for the city is going to be, and when the city manager doesn't even know what he ought to know. That's embarrassing. He either knew, and it's embarrassing because he didn't let the council know, or he didn't know, and that makes it appear that the department heads have much more power than they should.
School board, you've got Teresa Thiel and Karen Bowen, who are, for the most part, of one mindset, and then you've got Dan Becker and Michelle Monty, who seem to be of a different mindset. And yet, I don't know if this is surprising or not, but the two top vote getters in the primary election were Dan Becker and Karen Bowen. Is that pretty typical of a city that seems to be kind of split on some of these issues?
Well, split. I mean, I'm not sure what plan is what. You know, what exactly is being proposed and who's proposing it. And I think that fractured might be how people feel about all this, because they have no idea how it's. Even if you were following all of it and reading everything very carefully, you'd be somewhat confused as to what's being proposed. And you have almost the feeling that there'll be, plan number 16 coming out by some other committee that we haven't heard about yet, made up, I'm not sure how. And so, people were relatively satisfied with the schools as they are, probably would feel comfortable with Bowen. But I've always felt, just as a city council, you want a naysayer. You want someone who is obnoxious and up there and always demanding answers and always unsatisfied with the answers they're receiving and willing to vote no on something. And for better or worse, Dan Becker is that person. And there are a lot of people who vote that way. They want to have a majority that will probably go forward with whatever the superintendent and the professionals are going to say, but they want someone who forces them to make the case. And Dan is one of those people.
Do you, and Dan, you were at the recount. Do you see that recount issue that Dan was involved in as a factor in this election for him at all?
Well, it was amusing at the time. They said, well, after he behaved so badly during that recount, that he'd never have any future in politics. Well, I don't think people remember that, and I don't think it mattered all that much. I mean, if you watch local politics closely, then of course you remember it and what he did and so on, but I don't think most people care about that.
Okay. I think Don Sween not running again gave Becker an opening. He has good name identification, and I think he's probably a stronger candidate than the two women who are almost 1,000 votes behind both Ian and Bowen. So.
Well, Teresa Thiel is more of an establishment candidate.
She is.
But she has some problems with appeal too. Just she's a little bit like Michelle Monty, a little abrasive. Not a hands-on friendly kind of candidate. So I think she has some baggage too.
Do you see this pretty much ending up then on election day as it did on primary day, with Bowen and Becker getting in?
Well, you can never say something with certainty, but unless something happens between then and now, I don't see what is likely to change. And once again, you could imagine, the movement towards an extremely unpopular proposal for the schools that the public is really upset about, and for the candidates taking the wrong position at the wrong time, that could change the outcome.
Okay. Well, it's going to be interesting, I think, to see how this all sort of fleshes out come the 3rd of April. So thanks very much for being here.
Well,
it's always fun.
And invite me at the last minute again, so to talk about things I really wasn't thinking about.
But you came through swimmingly, as you always do. So, and thanks to Frank Tower, who joined us in the earlier part of the show. Dan, thank you. Thanks to the crew, and thanks to you at home, as always, for tuning in for the last hour. Go to the polls tomorrow and vote, and we will see you next time. Until then, take care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.